parts of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, maybe one or two a bit further west as well. But on the whole, a largely dry picture. And that's how it's going to be through much of the day, really. Fewer showers than today for sure. Most places avoiding them, just one or two towards eastern parts, perhaps filtering a bit further west, and a bit more showery rain affecting Orkney, Shetland and the far north of Scotland as well. Otherwise, a good deal of bright, sunny weather on offer, and temperatures, well, similar to today, maybe a degree or so higher, with generally light winds, not feeling too bad, although there will be a bit of a chill in the air. Little changes as we go through this evening. Perhaps the cloud and outbreaks of rain across the far north of Scotland edges a little bit further southwards. Otherwise, lots of dry and clear weather. So again, a frosty start on Sunday morning, and the cloud is going to build through the day. Only a bit of rain arriving for some of us. See you later.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in South Yorkshire on the M1 continue. The southbound exit is partly blocked at junction 33, the Sheffield-Rotherham exit at the scene of an accident. And the latest on that lorry that broke down in Cheshire on the M62, still partly blocking the eastbound entry slip road at junction 11 at Birchwood as you head away from the M6, away from Warrington. Meanwhile, in the West Midlands on the M42 southbound, the inside lane's closed towards the M40 where a car's broken down, causing queues back to the Solihull bypass back up at junction 5. In Lincolnshire, south of Grimsby, the A16 Peaks Parkway closed just north of the Low Farm roundabout following an accident. And in Hampshire, north of Wickham, the A32 at Soberton, that's blocked off for accident investigation work. And in Dorset, northwest of Dorchester at Maiden Newton, the A356 is closed or a van's caught fire. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound? For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
please bring us up to date.
Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Queer. Now, there's some more bad news for Rachel Reeves after figures published today show that the economy unexpectedly retracted in January. But who's to blame, the Chancellor or President Trump? More madness from our immigration courts after a convicted criminal is allowed to return to the UK because he's depressed. Just what on earth is going on? Ed Miliband is also on his way to Beijing to tell the Chinese to cut their emissions, and at the same time, the Brazilian government are bulldozing the Amazon to make a motorway for COP30. Is it time to just chuck net zero out of the window? And of course, we're expecting a significant speech from President Trump tonight. We'll be going stateside as soon as the president starts speaking. and my panel. Right, so my panel tonight, journalist and broadcaster Dutita De Silva, and also founder of the Global Britain Centre, Ammon Bogal. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you very much indeed, Nana. It's 6:01. Our top stories. President Trump says there's a very good chance the war between Russia and Ukraine can come to an end after what he's described as productive discussions with Vladimir Putin. Trump says that those discussions have gone well. Putin claiming that he would sign up to a ceasefire, but only indeed if they match up to his list of demands. Meanwhile, let's have a look at Vladimir Putin here. This was a meeting he had yesterday with the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Now, after this meeting, he met Donald Trump's top advisor, top advisor Steve Witkoff. There is the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He's been at a G7 foreign ministers meeting in Canada. He says he's cautiously optimistic about a Ukraine ceasefire deal, but it won't be easy or simple. And he was asked if he trusts Vladimir Putin.
I think it's an irrelevant question. I think in foreign policy, it's not about trusting, it's about action. It's about things that you do. So in the end, on something like this, you can't just say you want peace, you have to do peace. And that's true for both sides in any conflict. Unfortunately, in foreign policy, oftentimes you will have to work with, I'm not talking about President Putin in particular, I'm talking about generally, you will have to work with people you don't like in foreign policy. And oftentimes you will have disagreements with people you like. Sometimes you will have to figure out how to work together with nations that are not aligned with you on most issues.
The UK economy shrank by 0.1% at the beginning of this year. The Office for National Statistics says the fall in GDP was mainly driven by a decline in the production and manufacturing sectors, with output down 0.9%. It will come as a blow to the Chancellor ahead of her spring statement, with the ONS saying the overall picture continues to be one of weak growth. Rachel Reeves says she's working to improve the economy.
This government is determined to turn around the poor performance of more than a decade when it comes to growth, and we need to go further and faster in growing our economy, in ensuring that we boost our national security and defence, and reforming our public services. That's why the Prime Minister set out yesterday reforms to regulation. That's why this week we've introduced the Planning and Infrastructure Bill to get Britain building again, but we must go further and faster to boost living standards and grow our economy.
The Conservatives have accused the Labour government of being a growth killer. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick says he's not surprised by the economic contraction.
This is a result of the political decisions that were taken by Rachel Reeves in her disastrous budget last year. By hiking taxes on working people and businesses across the country, they've killed growth. The last Conservative government left this one, the fastest growing economy in the G7. Now we're seeing growth is down, inflation is up. Every business that I speak to is making cuts, is looking to lay people off. This is a really bleak situation. And in less than 2 weeks, Rachel Reeves is going to come to Parliament for an emergency budget. She said she wouldn't have to do this. She's coming to Parliament to explain what she's going to do, whether it's cutting public services or further raises in taxes.
Former Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick has appeared at the Old Bailey accused of multiple sex attacks on a woman and a teenage girl. The 50-year-old has previously denied 2 counts of rape, 1 count of sexual assault and a count of coercive and controlling behaviour in relation to the woman between 2014 and 2019. He's also denied 5 counts of indecent assault on a girl under 16 between 1989 and 1990. Carrick, who appeared via video link, has been remanded in custody until a further hearing in June. And a convicted killer who stalked the Girls Aloud singer Cheryl Tweedy has been jailed for 16 weeks. The 50-year-old Daniel Bannister had already been sent to prison for targeting the pop star twice at her home in Buckinghamshire. And when he turned up once again in December, the court heard how in the earlier visits he'd said he'd come to get Cheryl over the intercom before returning later that year asking for a glass of wine. Ms Tweedy told police she feared for her and her child's safety. That's it for the moment. More from me just after 7 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good evening. You're probably thinking, what's she doing there? No, I'm just hanging in there for Michelle. She's off now. But welcome to Dewbs & Co. with me, Nana Aquia. You'll be joining me until 7, my panel, broadcaster and commentator Judita De Silva, and also founding chairman of the Global Britain Centre, Aman Bogal. And as ever, we love to get your thoughts, your views, gbnews.com/your say. Now, of course, unfortunately, it's been, another day of bad news for the UK's economy. It's been revealed that today the economy defied predictions by unexpectedly contracting by 0.1% in January. Now, the blame game has already started. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, blamed global turbulence. And the Conservatives obviously blamed Rachel Reeves and her tax rises. Interestingly, Downing Street have already slapped down any suggestion that the economic contraction was due to President Trump's policies. So they've obviously put it all down to Rachel, which is unfortunate for her because I suspect her days are probably numbered in that job. But let's get the thoughts of my panel. So welcome again to both of you, Amal, and also Judita. Judita, we'll start with you then. So Rachel tried to allude to, her words were, the world has changed across the globe. We are feeling the consequences, which is frankly a way of saying, it's not me.
I think you can apportion blame evenly to both the change in the American administration and also the decisions that were made. The Labour government hinged their campaign on growth. And the fact is that the knock-on effect of things like the policies on national insurance and putting the tax levies more on the businesses is that even though the effects haven't been felt yet, everyone is acting preemptively. Yeah. That when it comes round, let's scale back this, let's scale back that, because we know we're going to have to offset the costs that are coming this way. There's also the issue of manufacturing, because businesses are thinking to themselves that why make what we may not be able to sell? But then you're also looking at the global landscape thinking that with some things like cars and metals for manufacturing, when it comes to the US tariffs that Trump is imposing, it's going to cost us more to actually export to one of our biggest export markets.
But she didn't know that, though,
She's
before.
not knowing about businesses
but she didn't
themselves.
know that before, let's be honest.
Why would manufacturing shrink so much, which contributed to this depletion in what the GDP has been?
OK, the point I'm making, though, is that Rachel and the plans that she's put forward to the economy, she didn't know that Donald Trump might do that. I mean, this is new stuff, so this is going backwards. We're looking at a quarter that's already happened.
Yeah, let's be honest here. Yeah. President Trump was president for 11 days in January.
That's right.
And none of what has happened since these reciprocal tariffs, they are meant to boost free trade, to bring people on the table and say, look, let's remove reciprocal tariffs and get freer trade. But going from that, we've gone from the fastest growing country in the G7 to this Marxist madness, this failure of an economy. Let's break this down. National insurance up, tax up, debt up. And what is down? Investor confidence is down. Jobs are getting down. Productivity is down. GDP is down. But more important than everything else, GDP per capita. The actual average working person is getting poorer. And that's what matters to the last man and woman in the queue. And, more than that, this is Labour's way of saying, look at the front bench. Look at Rachel Reeves. They have less business experience in all of them put together than, my daughter who is 18. And that's what we're dealing with. This is economic illiteracy that we are saying filter down into the economy. The bottom line is Labour isn't working.
And you haven't even mentioned the workers' rights or renters' reform, which is on the way. So the workers' rights, where somebody who comes to you and gets a job has rights on day one. You don't even know how good they are. So that lovely probationary period where someone doesn't quite match up, that has been contracted now. Angela Rayner's come up with that, and that is utter madness.
Well, one thing I've always fascinated by is that there are conversations that the right will have that are kind of what's contradictory. With one point, when you talk about the change that is needed within the UK, which we've had on different panels on this channel, is that you've got to change the status of the worker to incentivise them to get back to work. If you don't change the working landscape for the worker, how do you get them off benefits? Okay. How do you get them from home? But before let me land my point first. you've got to do something that's going to create a period of hurt. This is that period of hurt. Chances are this administration will not actually feel the dividends of the kinds of changes they are making, but they have to be changed, because what had happened thus far, it has been slow growth for a decade, for the better part of a decade. That's nothing new. But now that this contraction has happened, everyone's getting scared and saying that it's not working. Should they change tack now, it's going to be even more detrimental in the long term.
Look, you don't create growth by taxing the wealth generators that are small businesses with, pummeling them with national insurance rises. You don't create growth by driving out high net worth individuals at the fastest rate anywhere in the world that are leaving the UK. And you know why? Because they do not trust this socialist government to do the right thing. And
no, it doesn't. All it does is basically prove the points that working class people have had for years, which is that rich people like money. If you make it harder for them to, if you dent their profit margin, they will go where they can make profit. That's all that says. So you do have to scare the wealthy to know that they have to contribute that percentage more to make the working class person elevate from where they are now.
If we go back just a few years, we had the hike in the top rate of tax under the previous New Labour government, back when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. And the moment that top rate of tax was reduced by just 5% by George Osborne, you had higher tax receipts. So this idea, this socialist failed idea that you can somehow tax Britain into growth is nonsense. It doesn't work.
The nature of the taxes being brought in are fundamentally to change the workers, the welfare of the worker.
You won't have any workers. You won't have any workers. You don't have anyone to employ them. Who's going to employ them?
Play out your scenario.
Yes.
So they keep things the way they have been.
And you would have had the fastest growth in the G7.
So you think the way things were the past 14 years under the Conservatives was peachy keensy? We should carry on that way.
Under the Conservatives, we had 1,000 jobs created a day. We had highest rate of employment for a generation. And you know what? We had the highest rate of making millionaires out of ordinary people with opportunity.
Did you actually listen to the motivation of the voters that voted in Labour? We all know that they didn't vote Labour because they wanted Labour. They did not want any more Conservatives
than they did in 2017.
But if you listened to what motivated them to say they wanted the Conservatives out, I do not know how you could make that argument, because that shows a myopia you have to what the actual people wanted. Yes, Labour hasn't delivered on the hopes that they said they had for them.
Look,
but what the Conservatives had provided were not the Narnia that you are describing now.
Labour is delivering the most expensive electric energy in the world for British consumers and industry. Labour is driving out the wealth creators. Labour is hurting the ordinary working people by making everything more expensive. Inflation is up.
Wealth creators are leaving because they like money. They found themselves in a situation where the way they do business has to be changed to benefit the worker.
Everybody likes money.
Indeed, they do.
Right, so
do workers not like money?
People will leave this country if they are at the top of that and they're bringing wealth in, and suddenly you tax them so much so that they are very mobile, they will move. Now, the wealth generators provide the largest amount of money and income in tax. So whether you're saying they like money or not, you are unwise as a government to allow those people to flee in the numbers that they have, because it will fall on the middle and the lower classes. And that's just common sense. That's just economics. You're not doing it because you love the upper class. You're doing it because it will save the middle and the lower classes from the huge tax burden that they will face as a result of the policies.
For every single high net worth individual, a millionaire which leaves Britain because of the socialist government, the tax burden that then places it on 15 working people. Is that fair?
I 100% agree that in all of the policies, whichever the government is, they always squeeze the middle. I'm with you 100%
Do you think that's right?
on that. Of course it's not right, because I feel...
So you agree that we shouldn't be taxing high net worth individuals?
I see the vision of what they're trying to do.
Which is what?
You have to recalibrate the distribution
what do you mean?
of...
Sorry, I want to hear this vision.
You have to recalibrate the distribution of contribution that comes from a top benefiting system that the Conservatives have kept in place for over a decade.
So with their system, with their system, then, this redistribution and calibration of the tax input, how do you see it playing then? Because if you've redistributed in a way where you lose the top echelon, who are paying about 40%, I think, of the tax, or even more than that, then the redistribution means that the lower and middle classes, then the larger portion of the burden falls on them, and you've lost the top.
This is where I say the geopolitical landscape will come into play. You are completely right. What is going to happen is you will have the flight of the wealthy.
That's right.
But when they relocate to wherever they choose, whichever country it is, to re-establish their business, business, the landscape of that country is going to change because
so you're saying we need to wait.
No.
So they'll go and then we'll wait 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
How long? Have to. It's going to be about, I would say, 5 to 10 years. Because when you see...
utter nonsense. Most of our high net worth individuals are fleeing to the UAE, the most stable country in the Middle East. They're fleeing to Singapore. And do you know what? They're even going to America. Right now, let's break this down. We are spending more on debt interest than the education budget. That cannot be right.
But Nana said, play it out. When you relocate, because I know this...
So that's 10 years' time,
yeah, you know,
when it all comes...
Let me finish. When they relocate to the UAEs, to the Americas, to the Singapores, you're relocated to countries that do have what America and Trump is pushing now, their country first. The kinds of levies and the kinds of red tape you have to go through to relocate your business is going to hurt them in the short term.
Really
when they feel that's hurt in the short term, they will then request their actual desire to leave the UK and the
All right, let me ask then. So in this time that they've gone to these countries where hopefully the geopolitical structure may change in the favour and the way that you said, what about the working and middle classes who are now carrying the heaviest burden? Starmer said those with the broadest shoulders should carry the heavier burden. But it's not worked, has it? Because those with the broadest shoulders have left, and now it's those with the weakest, smallest shoulders that are carrying the majority of the burden. And under your idea, they'll be carrying it for at least 10 years.
No. At worst, I'm saying that it is a decision that in the short term will lose them a lot of money and they will end up reverting back. You have to go through the period of where they realise that the grass is not greener on the other side.
This is exactly the type of globalist, socialist thinking that is daydreaming in cloud cuckoo land. The point is, after 10 years, or even after 5 years when Starmer gets kicked out, you know what? You'll turn around and say, oh, well, this wasn't actually real socialism. We need to try it again. It doesn't work. Look, I was born...
I don't understand that point you just made.
But this is every single time socialism fails, you know, socialists say, oh, well, it wasn't real socialism.
Can you actually give me a tangible example of that?
Well, I'll give you a tangible example. That's what the Corbyn whole general election was based on. New Labour wasn't real socialism. You know, we haven't had real socialism in this country. Let me tell you, I was born in India. We had socialism imposed on the Indian population for 70 years. And you know what? It killed people. People had to queue 20 years just to get a telephone line, just to be having a place in school for their kid. And you know what? Since free market capitalism, 50 Indians lifted out of poverty every single minute. That's what this is about.
Isn't that what Mrs. Thatcher said? The problem with socialism is that it all ends when you run out of spending other people's money, which is the problem that this government may well have. But we shall see, because Rachel Reeves in a very short while will be releasing her spring statement. Let's hope it has got a spring in its step. Stay with us, though. Coming up, a Ghanaian man is allowed to return to Britain because he's depressed. What is going on in our courts?
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
SpaceX latest Starship exploded over the Caribbean Sea.
I was wondering where it'd gone.
Yeah, debris could be seen falling back to Earth moments after the Starship launched down from Boca Chica, Texas. The rocket, of course, was unmanned. This was the 8th test flight, and it was only meant to be in the air for an hour. But, importantly, the booster for this rocket was caught with those Mechazilla chopsticks in an impressive display, the 3rd time that's happened.
Those Mechazilla chopsticks? This is Elon Musk's spaceship, isn't it?
Tell.
Starship, sorry.
Yeah.
Planetary scientist Andy Lound could tell us more about this. Andy, so was this a disaster or is this just a little obstacle to success?
Yeah, good morning. Par for the course, really. This is what kind of good afternoon. Par for the course as these things go on. The whole point of the tests, he's going to do 25 tests this year alone. And the interesting thing about this is you actually see the staging of it, where you've got the first stage, the booster, and then the second section, which is the ginormous rocket, which actually lifts off. The first stage, they seem to have got that cinched now, how it works quite well, coming back and landing in the chopsticks, absolutely breathtaking. The second stage, the Starship, was actually the new version of it, which they're testing out completely. And unfortunately, the first testing, the last test failed, and that was due to, it looks like, some frequency issues, which caused a frequency to go too high, which caused damage to the piping, which led to a fuel leak and a fire, which led to destruction. They made a lot of modifications, which led to test 8. And unfortunately, though, it has failed again. So they need to have a look exactly what the issues are which are causing these failures.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, 21 minutes after 6 o'clock. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Nana Aquia, keeping me company until 7. Broadcaster and commentator Juditha De Silva, and also founding chairman of the Global Britain Centre, Aman Bogon. Now, lots of you have been in touch already because that was a bit of a feisty discussion, and I found it quite interesting. But Nick Potts says, 14 years of Tory rule, it seems like heaven compared to 9 months of this Labour government. Yes, here, Casey says an ever-decreasing number of taxpayers are funding an ever-increasing number of, people scrounging on benefits and people who aren't working. Tim says, let's see what Robert says. Robert says the UK economy will be totally reliant on small shops, enterprises, if this madness continues unchecked. And, lots of comments coming in. Keep them coming, gbnews.com/you'll see. I'll read as many as I can. But another day, another crazy immigration decision. A convicted Ghanaian criminal is being allowed to return to the UK because separation from his family has left him depressed. Samuel Frimpong was jailed in 2008 after being convicted of using false documents to try and circumvent immigration rules and was subsequently handed a deportation order. However, Judge Abid Mahmood has decided to reverse the order, saying that the deportation was an unjustified interference in Frimpong's human rights, before adding that Frimpong poses no threat to others and has apologised profusely for his offending and behaviour. Right, let's get the thoughts on my panel. So, another crazy decision because he has a right to a family life and he's depressed.
Well, imagine Britain's shock, Ned. I mean, we've had the chicken nugget man. We've had
chicken nugget man.
We've had the paedophile who had a right to life to his own kids, even though he was exploiting other kids, and now this madness. Look, my bottom line is very simple. If you break into our country or you engage in immigration fraud, you're a criminal and you have no right to be here. If you have a right to your family life, well, if he's sick and tired of his homeland, maybe he could try and take them back over there. Look, this is a farce. Immigration tribunals have become a farce, hiding behind the ECHR and Article 8. We should be withdrawing from it. We should be leaving it. We do not need a foreign court to tell us how to guarantee our human rights and freedoms. We're the country that gave the world the Magna Carta. OK? So, look, this makes a mockery, a complete utter mockery of our immigration system. It's a slap in the face of every legal migrant who has jumped through hoops, especially people who are married to foreign spouses, who now have to jump through extra hoops to prove a really high percentile of income to bring a foreign spouse into the country.
Yet these people are able to come back after committing crime, being deported, and then a little complaint, which I wonder who paid for that appeal as well. Did he pay for his own appeal, or did we end up having to pay for it? Although he wasn't in this country at the time, as I understand it. Judith?
I think, two things can be right at the same time. He absconded when he should have been going through the process to actually to find out whether his residency could be waived or was going to be granted. Doing that was a crime, and he faced the consequences. He was deported. tie a bow around it's that fact. It is also right that any human being in the world, if you have to live in a separate country to your entire family...
Well, you don't have to, do you? I mean, you don't have to.
If you're placed in circumstances where that is your living state.
Or you put yourself in circumstances.
Yeah, whether it's your fault or someone else's, that is your living state. If I had to live in a different country to my family, I'd get depressed. Any human being would get depressed.
So why doesn't he take them back?
No, that is the grounds for which his lawyer was able to argue a compelling case. That is true. So those two facts are true at the same time. The conversation now is about when you know that is the potential for somebody to be living in a state that is depressive for any human being in that state, how do you get the family either back to Ghana or him here? He can't come here, fine, that's the option. Then are you going to introduce legislature that when an immigrant is evicted, the entire family has to go as well, so they waive their citizenship? That's a different motivation for how they conduct themselves while in the country.
Listen, boo-hoo, my heart bleeds. He's done something that's illegal and he's been deported, which is the right thing. He should not be coming back. He's been deported. That is the deal. Why can't people accept that that's the punishment? Hang on, no, let me finish. Why can't he accept his punishment? And if he has got a right to family life, then he should invite them to come back to Ghana.
Let's not forget, Nana, his children were born after his conviction.
Exactly.
So he chose to put his family and his wife through that, knowing full well that if he was going to be deported, then what on earth was he thinking?
As I began, the merit of him being deported is valid. He should have been. I'm debating...
Yes, but he chose to make that family after he was convicted. I'm getting to the debate of the points that always comes out of conversations like this. The ECHR, fine, leave the ECHR. But the fact is that Article 8 you're talking about, what it represents is in several different other tenets that also govern this kind of legislation that people can also use. Leaving the ECHR is not the silver bullet. Look at the 1951 Refugee Convention or the UN Convention on Torture or the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
No, hold on. The problem with this is that the ECHR has been enshrined into British laws. So parts of it are within the Human Rights Convention. And all the things you're saying there, Refugee Convention as well. But the problem is, this is what I think Keir Starmer should do. Because remember, he came up with this coalition of the willing, where he got everybody together and they said, well, we're willing to fight. Keir Starmer, you are a human rights lawyer. Why don't you create a new human rights, like an ECHR or a UK ECHR or whatever, which you can encourage the other European nations to join? So why don't you and all your friends, your coalition of the willing, get together and focus on this mass immigration issue that we have and come up with something that is an alternative to the ECHR, an alternative that those people, those other countries could also join so that there's not that nonsense, well, we're leaving it, what will we do about human rights in this country? Things have changed. Would you say that's a good idea? Keir Starmer knows what he's doing with law. He could create something with other European leaders and they could agree it, and then there's the option to either go with the ECHR or to go with the one that's been created.
I do agree with that.
I mean, he could do that. Why does he not do that?
Do you know how long that would take?
I don't care. He should get on with it.
That's what I'm saying, that once you actually see the actual landscape of just how the ECHR functions into the human rights governance of so many countries, you will know the scope of it. I believe that it should have been started a long time ago if you knew this problem had presented so long ago. And it does, like the point you just made, which is most important, done in cooperation with the rest of Europe. That is how it's
going to work. He creates it, and then if they want to follow it, because I suspect, listen, I suspect they're all pretty annoyed at this mass migration that's happening as well. I suspect.
No, they're not.
Well, if they're not, then they are. If they're not, if they're not, then they can stay.
How do you explain the rise of the rights across Europe?
They could continue to subscribe to the ECHR, and we will go with the other one.
Well, look, let's be honest. We've had the recent elections in Germany. What is the left in Germany now saying as holding
500,000?
Yeah, they want to enshrine it into law that they want to import at least 500,000 immigrants, mass immigration, into Germany every year. So they're not sick of it. In fact, it's the opposite.
No, you said that you said a blanket statement that Europe is not sick of it.
Yeah, Europe isn't sick of it.
The rise of right-wing sentiment across Italy, Hungary, Germany, and all the rest of Europe accounts for the sentiment of the people.
It counts for nothing.
The way you argue constantly has this myopia about disregarding the voices of a whole swathe of people who have made their feelings clear. Yes, the left says what you say, but the right also speaks very loudly about how they feel, which is in conjunction with the way you feel.
Do you really think the AfD are forming the next government in Germany?
Of course they're not.
So who's in charge then?
Are you going to say that the AfD is something that can be ignored? Are you going to say the Reform UK is something that can be ignored? They represent the sentiment of a percentage of the people that have to be recognised, and it comes from somewhere. It comes from a problem that exists, which revolves around immigration. So to say that they don't care and they don't have a problem with it is not true.
Amal.
Look, let's be honest here. If you think Keir Starmer can be trusted to create some coalition they're willing to sort out immigration for Europe and the UK, no, it's not happening. He'll just use it to take us back into the EU even faster than he's already planning. Look, rather
but is it not a good idea that perhaps we need to write something else? Because I think the fear is that we go out of this and somehow we suddenly become inhumane, which we helped to draft the thing, so we're unlikely to do that if we walk away from it.
What we need, Nana, is what Dominic Raab was legislating for a few years ago, which is a British Bill of Rights. You know, we need our own British Bill of Rights. We don't need to surrender our sovereignty to pool it with the Europeans to decide how human rights are protected in the UK. We didn't need to do that for the last 1,000 years. We don't need to do it now.
He had such a good idea that they tried to get rid of him and then eventually it worked.
The reason you do is because every country recognises, especially within the European bloc, that scenarios will inevitably exist, will inevitably present themselves where you're going to need to, extradite a criminal or try someone who's a British person who committed a crime in a country in Europe. If you have a Bill of Rights that completely excises you from cooperation with Europe,
we're dealing with
boxing yourself into a difficult position.
I find it quite fascinating that you believe that we need another government to govern our government.
You don't need...
Sorry, let him finish,
It is prudent.
Juditha,
it's not prudent. The British people voted to leave for a very simple reason, to have democratic accountability. And you don't do that by surrendering sovereignty again to an unaccountable elite in Brussels. We can have bilateral treaties with countries in Europe and around the world. The rest of the world functions that way, in terms of extradition, in terms of migration pacts. Right, we have a migration pact with the Japanese. They're not in the EU.
But did you hear the point Anana said that I agreed with? I said that
it should have been...
It should have been started a while ago. We happen to be a Starmer government
we should
right
not
now.
Be having any pact.
That if you're going to draw up a new document, because remember, there is no central document that actually...
need foreign
If
courts.
you let me make the point.
No.
Well, yeah, come on, you have made the point a few times.
You do not have a document that centralises the governance of human rights in the UK.
OK, let Aman speak.
Britain
I want to hear what he has to say.
is a sovereign nation. We do not need to surrender our sovereignty to any foreign court to decide A, who comes in here, and B, how human rights are protected for the British people. That's not what we voted for. We voted for leave because we want democratic accountability. We do not need to be under the jurisdiction of a foreign court to make that happen. I don't understand why you can't understand.
In the documents that she proposed, I believe that's what you meant, correct me if I'm wrong, at no point did I say surrender your sovereignty.
Well, that's exactly what would happen.
I said it's something that should be done in cooperation with. You still have your sovereignty, but there's no problem, like you said, with the Japan agreement, that you recognise what might come along where you need the cooperation of other countries.
Individual EU countries without having to deal with Brussels. That's the problem with the EU. It's a government there to govern national governments. That's the problem with it. We don't need to be under a foreign jurisdiction to guarantee our own rights.
Circling back to a point, I've already said that.
OK, hold on. Let me make a point. Let me make a point. Listen. Let me make the point here. The ECHR, it's not working. Something needs to happen. And Keir Starmer has the knowledge of human rights. He's a human rights lawyer, barrister. He could draft something that works better in the UK's interest and work with other countries to make sure that, and give them the option to either go with the ECHR or go with something that perhaps they could draft together, a bit like the Coalition of the Willing, because this mass migration problem is a problem for all of us. Right, 33 minutes after 6 o'clock coming up. Brazil are preparing for COP30. It's the climate summit. There have been 30 of the damn things. They're supposed to be helping with the environment, but guess what? They're building a 4-lane motorway through the Amazon because that's where the summit will be held. Seriously, that is next.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Welcome to the Winter Sun Outlook, and if you are looking for some summer-like warmth, the place to be is Greece, where a spring heatwave will bring temperatures widely into the low to mid-20s, perhaps in some spots up to the high 20s, so remarkably warm air drifting out of North Africa, but at the same time, northern parts of Italy, across the Balearics as well, a lot of unsettled weather, further showers driving into Portugal, a respite into the weekend, but more unsettled weather here next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The latest GB News Travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in West Yorkshire on the M62. The eastbound carriageway of the motorway is partly blocked at junction 29 where it meets the M1, the Lofthouse interchange, at the scene of an accident. Meanwhile, in South Yorkshire on the M1, the southbound exit's partly blocked at junction 33, the Sheffield and Rotherham exit following a collision causing queues. The M42 all back open southbound through the West Midlands, but it's still really slow after a car broke down earlier on north of the M40. That queue nearly back to the Solihull bypass at junction 5. Lincolnshire, Headington, Grimsby and New Waltham were just south of Grimsby. The A16 Peaks Parkway closed north of the Low Farm roundabout following a serious accident. And on the western stretch of the M25, really slow clockwise, there was an accident at the M40. All lanes are back open, but it's still queuing back towards Heathrow. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Dewbs and Co. Welcome if you just tuned in. 38 minutes after 6 o'clock. I'm Nana Aquia, keeping me company till 7 o'clock. Broadcaster and commentator Judita De Silva, and also the founding chairman of the Global Britain Centre, Aman Bogle. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch because we were talking about this ridiculous notion that a depressed fraudster who was deported to Ghana can then return. It's been ruled by a judge because, of course, he wants a family life and he's upset and depressed because he's not able to see his kids, which, of course, is his own fault for committing fraud. But Humpty says, absolutely agree. We do not need foreign courts telling us who can or who cannot live in our country. Lucy says, leaving the ECHR would solve the problem of deporting foreign national criminals and their families. Why is this so difficult for Labour and the 14 years of Tory failures to implement? And Lucinda, a different Lucinda, says, where will Rayner, Reeves, Starmer and the rest of them buy their food when our farmers cease to exist? Probably fly across to Brussels, who will have the food needed because they look after their farmers. Yeah, well, that's a good question and one we would like to address, and we will be talking about that. But let's talk about energy. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. He's actually on his way to China to give them what for. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, they're not going to listen. But maybe the Secretary of State should rack up a few more air miles and visit Brazil, as it's been revealed that the Brazilian government is actually bulldozing the Amazon to build a brand new 4-lane motorway for COP30. Yes, that is the climate summit. Just so that all the delegates, 50,000 of them, can get to it. Make it make sense, please. Let's get to my panel. Judita De Silva. Madness, is it not?
Yeah, I think this kind of blew my mind because I think of myself trying to be rational and see the bigger picture. But there was a quote about saying that, oh, you can't have a COP to talk about the Amazon when this time you actually get to be in the Amazon. No, but you're driving a road through the Amazon, and the people have shut this down for years because they've been trying to build this road. But now they've kind of bulldozed their way through it. It kind of is reminiscent of what happened with the Brazilian World Cup, where you have a situation where people are starving and you can have a massive high-rise hotel just spitting distance from a favela, but then you're cool with that. There will be times after COP where you have to deal with the people's reaction to what you've done. And yes, it benefits some because it brings in business, but the thing you're fighting for, the environment, you're destroying in order to have people to come and talk about saving the environment. I just don't understand that.
And when you could actually do it on Zoom, let's be honest, you could, because you're trying to talk about how you're protecting the environment, so you could use it as a demonstration. And not only that, they will obviously fly there via private jet, don't they?
I quite agree with what you just say. And look, this is, I think, what these COP summits have now become. They are nothing more than an actual cop-out. We're actually taking real, tangible, deliverable action to make our environment cleaner and greener. But let's take a look back at Red Ed, you know, the Secretary of State for Net Stupid, who's now back in Beijing, right, shouting at the sky. That's what he's doing. I mean, look, the Chinese communists have emitted the same emissions of CO2 in the last 8 years that we have in the UK since the Industrial Revolution, right? That's what we're dealing with there. Now, what Ed Miliband hopes to achieve is to try and make our tomorrow greener and cleaner by making all of us poorer and colder today. That is simply not how it works. Before coming on the show today, I had a quick look at the national grid and what we're generating. Right now, we have a deficit of around 4 gigawatts that we are unable to generate ourselves, whilst we are paying £170,000 per hour to people with windmills that don't need to be turned on at a particular time of day because the national grid can't handle taking electric generated from point A to point B in the country. It's absolute net zero madness.
Well, he's also, obviously, we're going to be having loads of pylons. It seems to me that as long as we've got net zero, anything goes. So you're going to put a load of pylons in and forget about the habitat of the animals or maybe some other side effects that pylons might have or may or might not have. I don't fancy one in my backyard. But we're going to do all of that, solar panels, or take up fields for solar panels instead of growing our own food, just so that we can import food from elsewhere. None of it makes sense. To me, it's a hoax. I think the whole net zero thing, to me, is a hoax.
I don't think it's a hoax. I think, like, first of all, the road through the Amazon is just ridiculous. But the whole idea, the point you made about COP being ridiculous, no, it isn't. Because the whole idea is when you have... when you have...
There's been 30 of them.
Yeah.
What has it achieved?
Because it hasn't achieved. Debates the actual achievement, 100%.
OK, what are the achievements?
But
all right, talk to me about what they've achieved.
That the world leaders who push the global conversation coming to the table at the same time to talk about a collective purpose, that's the motivation.
Yeah,
and I agree with that.
You
cannot operate in silos in countries when you're dealing with a global issue. that is the point of
Let's break this down.
What it actually achieves... So let me just finish my point.
Sure.
What it actually achieves, we can debate. But the point is that it exists for the point that everyone involved in the collective solution should be at the table having the conversation.
We can have
That's true. She's right. Everyone involved in the collective solution should be at the table. So if China and the US and people like that aren't there or wherever, then there's no point. And India...
Yeah,
what's the point?
So let's break this down. 3 years ago, Boris Johnson was talking about modular nuclear reactors in the UK. Where are they? That would solve a lot of our problems. The International Solar Alliance. Now, I was in India a few months ago. They're generating 100 gigawatts of renewable energy in a meaningful way by not making people poor today. They're still burning a lot of coal. But where is our work in the UK on the International Solar Alliance?
Yeah, look...
it's about deliverables, not talking shop.
COP26 was in Glasgow. The solar-powered things didn't work. COP27, they talked about a load of stuff and that didn't happen. COP28, same thing again. It's a talking shop. It's a complete cop-out. And I think the whole thing, to me, is a bit of a scam, really. But what do you think? gbnews.com/you'll say coming up, is it discriminatory to call someone a numpty? We're expecting President Trump any minute now. Stay with us. We will follow that. This is GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of fine weather to come as we go into this weekend, but it is still going to be chilly with some frosty nights as well. The reason why we're going to have a lot of fine weather is because high pressure is building from the west, and it's this that's going to help clear away many of the showers that we've seen through recent days. That being said, there will still be a few showers for some of us as we go overnight across some southern southeastern parts, maybe eastern parts of England as well, and also towards the far north of Scotland, a bit of cloud and some showery rain starting to edge in. Otherwise, a lot of dry weather, some clear skies, allowing temperatures to take a bit of a dip, a bit of a frosty start for some of us, though in the far southeast, a brisk wind will stop temperatures dropping especially low here, and also across the very far north of Scotland, Shetland and later into Orkney, we are going to see a zone of cloud and outbreaks of rain pushing in, so not turning as cold here overnight, but elsewhere across much of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and Northern England, a bright start, but also a frosty one with temperatures sub-zero for many places. Slightly less chilly to start further south, but nonetheless a bit of frost is possible, and do watch out, there could be a few patches of fog or freezing fog in a few spots as well. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, and apart from one or two showers across some parts of England in particular, it's looking largely dry for most of us, some sunshine breaking through at times as well. Worth noting though, the cloud and outbreaks of rain across the far north of Scotland will edge a bit further southwards. Temperatures for many similar to today, maybe a degree or so higher, so feeling okay in the sunshine, but in the southeast there will be a nagging breeze. After another chilly night for many of us, Saturday into Sunday. Sunday does look like it would get off to a bright start towards the southwest, but cloud towards the north-northeast will eventually make its way southwards across many places, and there will be a few spots of rain mixed in with this as well. As we go through next week, it is going to start chilly, but temperatures should gradually rise as we go through the week. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good evening, 47 minutes after 6 o'clock. Have you just tuned in? Where have you been? No, it's fine. You're here now. I'm Nana Aquia. I am in for Dewbs and Co. Joining me and keeping me company until 7, broadcaster and commentator Judita De Silva, and also founding chairman of the Global Britain Centre, Aman Bogal. Right, now, finally, is it discriminatory to call your work colleague, a numpty? A sergeant at the Met has lost his attempt to sue the force after a senior officer called him a numpty. In a welcome outbreak of common sense from our courts, Judge Richard Nichols said that the term was used in a light-hearted manner and was not discriminatory. Right, what do you think? Aman Bogle.
Don't make me laugh. Let's be honest here. Yes, of course, our British culture is full on about decency and respect, but it's also about a bit of banter and light-heartedness. The amount of times in school, my teachers might have called me a pillock.
Hang on a minute. I don't know whether you can say that. Apologies if anyone was offended by that.
Oh, really? Well, there you go. Offended by what? What teachers would be calling us 20 years ago?
Well, that's a lot harder. You see, that's the problem. You can't say what people would have called you 20 years ago that was acceptable.
Well, I still do amongst my friends, and that tells us a lot. Look, one of my favourite such
don't
words...
do it on air.
OK, fair enough. Look, can I say dunderhead?
I don't know what that is.
Well, there you go.
OK.
I think that we should bring this back into British parlance.
Offended there, because I don't know what it is.
It basically means numpty. There you go.
See, because it might not be on the Ofcom list of words, and if it isn't, then I suppose you get away with it, but it could mean something bad. What do you think? Numpty. You're a numpty. Would you be...
I think it's a bit of a stretch, because, first of all, if you put it in context, if you had a learning disability which was fully disclosed and everyone was aware of it, and then they called you a numpty, that's an issue. If we don't know the exact dynamics of the social situation and the interplay between the people that led to the numpty being said, it could have offended you, yes, granted, and an apology was given. Done. But to go as far as saying that it's something racial discriminatory, that's a stretch. And also, you do a disservice to things that actually are discrimination by diluting the significance of it by saying something like numpty is discriminatory. I've been called a numpty.
Have you? Never. What are you?
Yeah, it's easier
Never.
because I did something rather silly.
You numpty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit like when Dominic Raab was accused of bullying, when he threw that scrunched up, piece of paper covering his eaten sandwich into the bin. I mean, look, we need to be living in the real world. I mean, it's a waste of a court's time, and it's not really real, is it? Come on, let's be honest.
Do you think that part of this is because we have sort of mollycoddled a certain generation, infantilised people, so now it's hurty words and hurty feelings, and our government aren't really helping out with that because they seem to be jailing people for hurty words?
I think yes and no, because this is a bit of a stretch. It's gone too far. But I think it's positive that we've come to a state in our society where you can feel a grievance and speak up about it. All of that stiff upper lip, hold it in, led to a different kind of social and emotional dysfunction that a lot of us suffered from when we say our parents were a certain way, or my dad's not very expressive, or this and that. That was because of the environment they were raised in. Now you can feel and talk about it, and I really applaud that, but don't take it too far.
Well, look, I do think people have become a little bit too soft with all of this, and they're literally... I think there's a generation of wallflowers who are literally listening to every single word and clinically interpreting it so that they can then find offence in something that you've said, even though it actually doesn't make any sense, like complaining about mankind and calling that.
I mean, a lot of these situations, it's just people looking to be offended so that they can make a big, brouhaha out of it. But more than anything else, I mean, I think, didn't we hear that, this government now wants to police our pub banter? I mean...
It's hilarious.
This is... What are we living in? Are we going to have a Stasi next, telling us what we can and not say in our pubs, having a chat with our friends?
Well, we did actually have that. They wanted you to listen into conversations. They wanted the bar personnel to listen into conversations and then report people if they said something bad, which is ridiculous. But look, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Lucia came in. She said, because we were talking about net zero, COP30, which is about to kick off again. They're drilling. They're actually mowing down parts of the Amazon rainforest. I think it's a project that they actually wanted to do, but they've used COP as the excuse to finally finish it. Lucia says, drill, baby, drill. For those who are not aware of who have not she's yet signed, there's a petition to Parliament about drilling. And then Stuart says they all look forward to COP because it's all just a bit of a knees up. That's it. They achieved nothing, words, and I think the destruction of the Amazon is just, again, a knees up. It's ridiculous. Catherine says net zero is terrible. It's been forced on us. A real agenda for alternative energy would be phased in and transitioned gradually, not imposed during particularly difficult times. And Patricia said the Amazon rainforest is described as the lungs of the world, so I'm at a loss to understand. She said he's very angry, and building a road for COP to 2030 is actually ridiculous, but it could be discussed on Zoom. Well, that's exactly what I said as well. Listen, I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, Amal Bogle. Are you staying with me for the next hour?
I am indeed, yes.
Wonderful. And also Judita De Silva. Judita, are you going?
I've got to go.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it?
Got to get on my broom and fly away.
No, she's going to fly away. Well, actually, I'd like to see that. How does it work? Well, listen, lots of you have been getting in touch. Keep getting in touch. gbnews.com/your say. You can also follow the show live on YouTube, or why not download the GB News app? It is completely free. Why not do that? But again, thank you to my panel. Up next, we are expecting Donald Trump to speak any second now. Stay with me. Do not go anywhere.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of fine weather to come as we go into this weekend, but it is still going to be chilly with some frosty nights as well. The reason why we're going to have a lot of fine weather is because high pressure is building from the west, and it's this that's going to help clear away many of the showers that we've seen through recent days. That being said, there will still be a few showers for some of us as we go overnight across some southern southeastern parts, maybe eastern parts of England as well, and also towards the far north of Scotland, a bit of cloud and some showery rain starting to edge in. Otherwise, a lot of dry weather, some clear skies, allowing temperatures to take a bit of a dip, a bit of a frosty start for some of us, though in the far southeast, a brisk wind will stop temperatures dropping especially low here, and also across the very far north of Scotland, Shetland and later into Orkney, we are going to see a zone of cloud and outbreaks of rain pushing in, so not turning as cold here overnight, but elsewhere across much of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and Northern England, a bright start, but also a frosty one with temperatures sub-zero for many places. Slightly less chilly to start further south, but nonetheless a bit of frost is possible, and do watch out, there could be a few patches of fog or freezing fog in a few spots as well. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, and apart from one or two showers across some parts of England in particular, it's looking largely dry for most. Some sunshine breaking through at times as well. Worth noting though, the cloud and outbreaks of rain across the far north of Scotland will edge a bit further southwards. Temperatures for many similar to today, maybe a degree or so higher, so feeling okay in the sunshine, but in the southeast there will be a nagging breeze. After another chilly night for many of us, Saturday into Sunday. Sunday does look like it will get off to a bright start towards the southwest, but cloud towards the north-northeast will eventually make its way southwards across many places, and there will be a few spots of rain mixed in with this as well. As we go through next week, it is going to start chilly, but temperatures should gradually rise as we go through the week. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
And a very good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems along two stretches of the M62 tonight. First of all, through West Yorkshire, the motorway is partly blocked eastbound from junction 29 to 30, just east of the M1 off the Lofthouse interchange at the scene of an accident involving a couple of lorries and a car. And further west, it's down to two lanes westbound from junction 12 to 11, just after the M60, the Eccles interchange, following an accident. In Warwickshire, southeast of Warwick at Bishop's Tatchbrook, just off the M40, the A452 has been closed along Europa Way northbound. Emergency repairs are underway after a lorry caught fire this morning. In Lincolnshire, between New Waltham and Grimsby, the A16 Peaks Parkway, that's closed north of the Low Farm roundabout following a serious accident. And in Hampshire, north of Wickham, the A32 at Soberton, closed for investigation work following an accident this afternoon. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We want to spruce up your spring with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash that you can spend however you like. But that's not all, as you'll also receive not one, but two brand new designer watches and a fabulous Mulberry handbag. For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and a designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening and welcome back to an extended version of Dewbs & Co. with me, Nana Akweer. We're giving you an extra hour because we are expecting a very important speech from President Trump any minute now from the US Justice Department. So ahead of this, I can be speaking to Jennifer Ewing, who's the spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, and also founder of Global Britain Centre, Aman Bogal. Right, so we are expecting a speech from Donald Trump. I'm wondering, why is he doing this? Because it's unusual, because it's at the Department of Justice.
Sure, you're right. And while it is unusual, it's not completely unprecedented. I believe the last one was President Obama in 2014 when he announced some new surveillance measures after the Edward Snowden situation. But the reason he's doing this is, and we just heard from the new FBI director, Kash Patel, is because you'll recall over the last couple of years, President Trump has made an issue about how the Department of Justice has been weaponized against him. There were unprecedented cases, against him, which we know. And what I think they're going to say, oh, here we go.
Oh, crikey. Are we going live yet? Oh, no, carry on.
Okay, sure. So I think what he's going to say is, hey, we are going to depoliticize the Department of Justice and get back to what it should be doing all along, which is law and order. So the new director of the FBI, Kash Patel, just made a speech exactly on that stage a few minutes ago, talking about a lot of the fentanyl drugs that have been seized, a lot of the MS-13 gang members that have been arrested. He was incredibly complimentary to just old-fashioned police, law and order, and said what we want to do is get out of their way so they can get back to the business of keeping Americans safe.
Does this have anything to do with some of the lawfare that was used against him as well, though? Is there anything he could be announcing in this, because he's apparently a convicted felon, although has he got rid of all those so-called convictions?
Well, I mean, the cases have now been dropped, and so, no, I don't think, look, he has said that he's going to depoliticize the Department of Justice. Is he going to make some big announcements like, I'm going after these people, in a specific way and naming names? I hope not, because that is, most Americans do not want to see him wasting his time just revenge, going after other people. As much as it might feel nice, it defeats the purpose of what he was elected to do. But one of the top things he was elected to do was, control the border and get law and order back. So that's what he's going to be talking about. But yes, Nana, absolutely, this is, again, an unusual speech for him to give, because he wants to show we will no longer be politicizing this department.
Indeed. Look, I think, Nana, as an outsider to America, I would say, looking from afar, from the other side of the Atlantic, I think this is about President Trump putting America first. For so long, we've had this issue of fentanyl, the gangs roaming around American cities and towns, and bringing in Kash Patel, I think, was a masterstroke. This is a man who gets it. This is a man that I think the FBI also went after in a very politicized way.
You're right.
So he's going to be there, I think, to sort things out. And I think in this country, we can learn a thing or two from this to reflect on how this Labour government is bringing in two-tier justice into our justice system with these sentencing guidelines. If President Trump is putting America first, can we have a Prime Minister here now who's going to put Britain first? Or is that too controversial to say nowadays?
But it's interesting, though, because what about the Democrats, though? Because when the Democrats were in power, it was difficult to say what they're actually doing, to be fair, because Joe Biden wasn't really at the helm.
No.
What did they do to the justice system that was so bad? Because, did law and order, or did it go out of control under them? It's kind of happening everywhere, really.
It did. And not to say that all of the crime that had taken place had been because of border issues. It was not, though that was a big part of it. The other thing that we saw was a lot of our wonderful cities, you know, like where I'm from, San Francisco, California, or New York City, or Chicago, these wonderful, beautiful, historic American cities that have just turned to, you know, lawlessness. You know, you basically have to ask somebody to come help you get some toothpaste, right? Because they're looking at this as petty crime. So kind of like Mayor Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, who cleaned up that city. You know, sometimes you have to start with the small things and just say a crime is a crime. I mean, until recently in California, until it was just overturned in November, it was not illegal to steal something if it was under $900. So, you know, for people like myself, if I went into an Apple store to buy, you know, new AirPods or something, and, you know, I'm a sucker, right? Because like I could have just walked out of it and probably not been arrested. Obviously, that's morally incorrect. But so it's just crazy things like that. So Trump, Kash Patel, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, they want to get back to just basics, back to basic law and order, depoliticize it. Now,
oh, goodness, couldn't we use some of that here in London?
We could do. I was going to ask you, what happened to Alvin Bragg? No, he was.
Yeah, well, we haven't heard much from him since. I mean, he loved the stage. All of the lawfare against Trump started under Alvin Bragg, and that's how we knew it was political. Because I believe it was, what was it? I mean, it was like March a few years ago, and Alvin Bragg came out and said that he was looking into the so-called hush money case, which was, you know, many years old, and people were wondering, well, why is this coming out now? Now, the reason it was coming out at that point is because President Trump announced that he was going to run again, right? So if this was really a case, like many of the other cases against him, that they felt was really a crime, whether it was the dressing room crime or, you know, some of these other things, they would have gone after him at the time. And I mean, look, and I think what happened is, and you'll remember, Ron DeSantis, Governor DeSantis from Florida, and Trump were neck and neck before the Alvin Bragg cases came out. And then as soon as that case came out, people realized, like, okay, I might not like Trump. I might actually, you know, think he was a terrible president and want to vote against him again. But that's my decision. That's not, you know, some attorney. Go on.
I think. Seeing what you're saying there, I think it was absolutely right when President Trump said, you know, they're not after you, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way.
Absolutely.
And I think we saw a lot of that under the Biden administration. But let's not also forget that in his last days, Biden gave away how many pardons? Is one of them being to Hunter Biden, I think.
Well, quite a few to his family, you know, brothers and all that sort of thing. So
I mean, that's not really very sort of American, is it? I mean, to sort of undermine your own justice system in that way, much in the way that we have two-tier justice here right now.
Well, listen, we are, if you just tuned in, we're actually waiting for President Trump. He's about to speak outside the Department of Justice. It's an interesting one because he doesn't normally do this. This is quite a rare occurrence to happen. So we're really, I mean, I do love listening to his speeches. I like the casual nature of them, the little insults that he hurls here and there, the real normalness to him.
It's authentic.
And he kind of breaks that third wall, and you're in there, you're listening, and you feel like you're listening to your dad at Christmas. So maybe not necessarily Christmas if he's talking about tariffs, which he has imposed. What's going on about those tariffs?
Yeah, good question. And you know, it's funny. I'm actually surprised that the Democrats have not talked more about the amount of times that that Trump talks about tariffs and how much the stock market has sold off. I mean, I think it's sold off something like 13% or something in the last month or so.
When you say sold off, is that good or bad?
Well, look, I mean, it depends. If you're holding stocks, it's not good, right? But then you have the argument, which, of course, Scott Bessent, you know, the new trade secretary, is talking about, look, there's Wall Street and there's Main Street. And that's not to say that Main Street doesn't participate in the stock market as well. I believe over 50% of Americans do hold stocks in their 401ks, which are our pension funds. But Wall Street isn't everything, and I think especially if you look at a lot of the tech stocks, the top, you know, the 7 mega stocks and everything, they were a little overheated, right? So a sell-off probably was going to occur. In addition to that, so much of the growth that we've had, a wildly large percentage of our GDP over the Biden years was false. It was injected capital. It was a lot of government jobs or healthcare jobs, basically government jobs. So what the, to go back to America First, what the Trump administration wants, what Under Secretary Bessent they want to do a few things. They want to move, with regards to tariffs, away from free trade back to fair trade. They want to go more from the public sector to the private sector. And there could be some pain along the way, for sure. I mean, the Canadian thing is...
Yeah, well,
that's not...
Well, the EU as well. I mean, well, look, he said that he's threatened a 200% tariff on alcohol from EU countries.
Well, all the better for our Scotch whisky.
Unless a nasty 50% tariff on whisky is stopped. And he doesn't like the EU, does he? He's called them lots of names that are quite unsavory.
I think I quite agree with President Trump. The EU is the biggest socialist project of biblical proportions in human history. And it's failed. It's failed its people. But going back to America, look, this is back again about President Trump trying to put America first. We've had the biggest ever announcement of investment by Apple of $500 billion in America to manufacture those AI chips. But this is also about getting jobs back to America. And again, should America really be subsidizing the Canadians by $200 billion every year? How would that be fair to the Americans? So I think this is, again, about putting the national interest first, standing up for the nation state. After all, I think what President Trump is doing is trying to resuscitate the American dream. In many ways, that's what we need to be doing here, to resuscitate the British dream. You know what, you work hard, you do the right thing, you can build your family, and you can have nice things, and you can have a country that is worth belonging to.
I think the problem is that people have got used to having this nice, easy trading relationship. And I actually think the way they are behaving is if, how dare you put a tariff on us? How could you? We're going to retaliate. It's like, well, that's business, that's life, it's not personal. It might be, I suppose, on some counts, but that's business, that's life, that's how it works. And this expectation that you should get a good rate because I just don't see why they should. I think Trump is right. Use tariffs, weaponise them in whatever way you can to get what you need for your own country.
I think what he's talking about is reciprocal tariffs. Like, you tariff me 5%, I'll tariff you 5%, right? Do it the even way. I mean, look, maybe one day we get to a world where it's just complete free trade and nobody tariffs each other, but we're not there right now. So he is going to be looking, at tariffs as a way to, as you just mentioned, bring more jobs, manufacturing, other companies. In addition to Apple, it's Japanese SoftBank, it's TSMC, the big chip maker out of Taiwan. So these are very big announcements of jobs coming back on shore. And with regards to getting used to these easy tariffs, Scott Bessent, Secretary Bessent, said the other day, look, the American dream is not buying cheap Chinese goods. It's the ability to get on the housing ladder and to, build a family and that sort of thing. So
it's normal things.
Normal
if you've
things.
just tuned in, we are waiting for Donald Trump. He's about to speak at the US Justice Department. Again, this is something that's not usual. It's not a regular occurrence. So we're expecting some big speaks. There's some people getting on the stage now, but I think they might be just clearing things up and getting it all ready. But we want to stay with it because we don't want to miss out on his speech. Lots of people getting in touch on some of the topics that we've been talking about throughout the show. Sue said that Keir Starmer's middle name, do you know what it is?
Oh, go on, tell me. This is going to be something.
I do not know what it is.
I mean, this is what they said, Rodney.
Rodney.
Rodney, and you know how on Only Fools and Horses...
By this time next year...
Rodney. Just apologies if anyone's offended by that word, because I don't know whether it's on the list. But, yeah, so that's apparently... I don't know whether that's true, but I'll do a bit of research.
By this time next year, Del Boy will be tax millionaires.
Casey said Trump is about to read somebody their fortune. Love it. Then Darren's come up with the new soap opera called Trump, and about the views and thoughts. Settle back, folks. He's certainly kicked some behind, as it were. And then this one's quite good. Michael says, I love tuning into Trumpton. I especially like Pew Pew, Barney McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble and Grubb. That is that was a programme that I used to watch when I was very young called Trumpton. He's just having a little bit of a laugh on that. So, yeah, Donald Trump's about to speak. I wonder what he's going to say. Ideas on what he might be saying in the speech?
I think he's going to sort of reiterate what Kash Patel said, which is we're were going to depoliticize this department and get back to just the basics of law and order. Now, keep in mind, he did not do a speech from here during his first term for a few reasons. One was, in the beginning, there was still that whole thing with the Russia collusion hoax going on, and he had fired James Comey. I think that was in 2017, and so he sort of avoided that. And of course, President Biden also avoided giving a speech at the Department of Justice because his own son Hunter was being investigated. And then also he did try to, when Trump was being investigated by Biden's Department of Justice, it would not have looked very good if President Biden was giving speeches, you know, from that area, even though, you know, there's thoughts that he was managing that behind the scenes. So, yeah, again, not unprecedented. Obama, the last person to do it, but certainly unusual.
Different circumstances. And I think this is probably President Trump in his second term trying to fulfill what he promised in his first term, which is that, you know, to drain the swamp. And that's exactly what I think America has needed. And I think with Kash Patel at the head or at the FBI, I think we'll see a lot of that. We, of course, have our great blob here in Whitehall. I think that certainly needs draining. Certainly with some of the activist judges that we have here, you know, announcing criminals to be allowed back into the UK because they are fed up of living in their own homelands.
That's ridiculous, isn't it? Absolutely absurd. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know why we're doing it this way. The Labour Party in this country have a massive majority. They could make changes quite instantly and quite quickly if they wanted to, because Keir Starmer has good control over his MPs as to what they do and don't vote for. I mean, you've got to give him that. He gets them behind him when he needs to. Something the Conservatives could not do and appeared to not be able to, would not do, because they're too busy squabbling, which is why a lot of people didn't forgive them and possibly may never forgive them, which again is probably why we're seeing the rise of reform as an alternative, because everyone sees Labour and Conservative as literally a uni party because their policies are literally each other. But President Trump has praised talks held with Russian President Vladimir Putin on a US proposed ceasefire deal in Ukraine, and he called those talks as good and productive. I mean, what do we know about that particular conversation?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the best thing is we're talking, right? After 3 years of this horrific war where hundreds of thousands of Russians and Ukrainians have been killed, we're talking, right? I don't recall a lot of diplomacy going on over the last 3 years. So I know Trump famously said, I'll end this war in 24 hours. Has it been 24 hours? No, but it's also been less than 2 months. And he's gotten both parties to the table, which is fantastic. I believe another update was the NATO president, Mark Rutte, met with Trump today and said that NATO membership is off the table for Ukraine. That was part of the conversation that he would have had with Putin. Trump sent a guy called Steve Witkoff out there. Steve Witkoff, not a name known to a lot of people. He's another New York sort of real estate magnate, a deal guy, somebody Trump's known for decades. And he's the one that's been really instrumental. He's in Moscow, you know, during all of these negotiations. So that's also interesting that it's not necessarily the diplomats doing this. It's these businessmen doing it.
Could you really see President Biden being able to do any of this?
No.
Let's be honest. I mean, look, this is a European war, which the Europeans have been unable to do anything about in terms of getting peace, in terms of getting a lasting peace, in terms of stopping the killing. And it's taken President Trump to come in and have the strength and the only hand that is strong enough to be able to bring us to this table. I mean, what did we have 2 weeks ago? The so-called coalition of the willing, which didn't last 24 hours.
More weapons, more arms, more
weapons,
fighting.
Exactly.
We also had a 1.6 billion promise of money injected for 5,000 weapons that were going to be created in a factory in Belfast.
Yeah.
But when I asked how long that would take to do that, and I asked a defence expert, he said, well, it would take about 5 years to build and get all these weapons out there and everything. And it's like, 5 years? When you start to dissect the plans that they're putting forward as though they sound great, and you think to yourself, well, how is that going to work? When you start applying the practicalities of these things, it doesn't work, does it? And then 2.2 billion of Russian assets will be seized, Russian assets, the money will be used for something else to try. It just all seems a bit ridiculous. But look, stay with us. We are expecting to hear from Donald Trump very shortly, any second. Do not go anywhere. This is GB News. Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, Egypt has discovered, well, I think it was a British and Egyptian team actually, finding the historic discovery, the long-lost tomb of King Thutmose II, the last of the lost tombs of the kings of ancient Egypt's 18th dynasty.
Yes, and it's the first royal Egyptian tomb to be discovered since King Tutankhamun's final resting place was found in 1922.
A very exciting discovery, and here to tell us all about it is the historian and author Martin Whittock. Martin, the first royal tomb since Tutankhamun.
Indeed, and identified as King Thutmose II. Other pronunciations are also available. And as you say, it's the last of the lost tombs of Egypt's 18th dynasty. They ruled between about 1550 BC and 1292 BC. It had been known before this tomb since 2022 as Tomb C4, as its occupant was then unknown. But what's happened now is parts of alabaster vessels have been found which have inscriptions bearing the name of Pharaoh Thutmose II and identifying him as the deceased king, along, interestingly, with the name of his wife, Hatshepsut. Now, she's an interesting woman because after he died, she ruled as pharaoh in her own right, one of only 2 women to do so in ancient Egyptian history. Now, the mummy of King Thutmose II was actually discovered during the 19th century at a nearby archaeological site known as Deir el-Bahari Kashet, and it's thought it was moved there after it had been looted by tomb raiders centuries ago. So the tomb is not going to give us the kind of treasures that we associate with Tutankhamun, I'm afraid, but it shows us the architecture of these royal tombs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
21 minutes after 7 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akweer. I'm in for Dewbs and Co. Keeping me company until 8 o'clock. Spokesperson for Republicans overseas, Jennifer Ewing, and also Aman Bogal. He's been with me for the previous hour. So welcome back. Stay with us because we have an extra hour because we're expecting an important speech from President Trump any minute now from the US Justice Department. Now, if you've just got tuned in and just got here, the reason why that is so interesting is because he doesn't usually do a speech there. This is a moment. I think the last time something like that happened was under President Obama, and that was many years ago. Ahead of this, though, I can speak to Jennifer Ewing. She is the spokesperson for Republicans overseas and founder of the Global Britain Centre, and, of course, Aman Bogal. Right, so that's what we've been talking about. What do you think, though? gbnews.com/your say. Is President Trump on the right track? He's done some incredible things in America. He's got things going within... How many months has he been in, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, less than 2, right? So January 20th, we're not even at March 20th. And I think one of the most shocking things is that he's doing exactly what he said he would on the campaign trail, and he's doing it quickly. He's had a cabinet in place, you know, almost immediately. Those he could get through. Sometimes these take months to get cabinet members in place, and he's doing what he said when he was running for office. And people are not used to governments. I mean, certainly not in this country, definitely not in the United States, moving so quickly. We've seen a huge number of executive orders that he makes a big public show of doing, which I know you can tell he has and it takes him forever to sign each one. You know, usually people have a quick signature, but he does this big sort of pomp and circumstance around that, which of course, you know, he loves. He gathers usually the media in there, and then somebody presents a bill, like I saw one the other day, and it was a woman came in and it was talking about Irish American Heritage Month and this sort of thing. So he, you know, he did the Lake and Riley Act, which was one of his first ones, which is, of course, one of the young women that was murdered by an illegal immigrant, and he put forward an act for her. So, yeah, there's lots of good policies that he's starting with kind of the 80-20 policies, the ones that even a lot of Democrats can get on board with. Democrats, interestingly, after 4 years of open borders with Biden, you know, really understand now that open borders are, for illegal people, obviously not legal, are a losing issue.
They're a bad thing,
yes.
a bad thing. I mean, our Prime Minister has been talking about smashing the gangs, actually, and when you say nothing much is happening, they blame the previous administration, and Rachel Reeves even tried to blame Donald Trump for the slump in the economy. Nice try, Rachel. Even Number 10 couldn't get behind her. But let's speak to US political analyst Eric Ham. Eric, welcome to the programme. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Eric, we are waiting with anticipation for this speech. What is Donald Trump likely to be talking about?
Oh, I think we're going to hear a whole litany of things from Donald Trump. This is going to be a continuation of his victory lap for the campaign back in 2024, as well as, of course, highlighting many of those executive orders that your guest just talked about that are now mostly being overturned in the courts. And I think what we're going to see from Donald Trump today is a continuation of the doubling down, of course, on issues such as his immigration issues and the mass deportations that we're seeing. And also, again, I think more grievance from him about what happened with him with the Department of Justice attempting to hold him accountable for January 6th, as well as absconding with classified documents. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And of course, Donald Trump will sell it as, of course, he is righting the ship and making things the way they should be and making the laws work for all of Americans.
See, I can't wait to hear what he has to say about January the 6th. Because people say, oh, yeah, no, he's forgiven everybody, like Keir Starmer calling him, not Keir Starmer, but David Lammy, suggesting that he was a white supremacist and all this old nonsense that they've come out with. But I think Donald Trump has got a very good memory, and I think he glosses over things for now. Do you think that the relationship with Keir Starmer and Donald Trump is a strong one, or do you think Trump is just simply playing the game?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. I do believe that he has a much better relationship with Starmer than he does, or that he had with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But nevertheless, I think what we're seeing here is under Donald Trump's leadership, I think we're seeing a complete upending of the global order that certainly was in place for the last 7 or 8 decades. And I think that is only highlighted by the fact that we're now seeing many of these ceasefire talks taking place in Saudi Arabia. And I think that, again, is a signal by Donald Trump that he's moving away from this Western bloc, and he's now creating a much different geopolitical landscape of which the United States will be a part of. And right now, I don't think it's many of the U.S. traditional allies that in the past have included countries like Canada, the UK, France, and others.
He doesn't like the EU much, does he? Do you blame him? Do you think he's right about them?
Well, I think his whole reasoning is he believes that the West simply has not provided its fair share. And I think when it comes to NATO, he's certainly right about that. And I think that actually is, I think, where we are now seeing, and in fact, even with this most recent meeting with NATO, we have heard many of them actually agree to that. But I think now what we're seeing is the president clearly got that right. The question now becomes, what in fact will the EU, NATO countries do to actually increase their defense posture, particularly in the wake of Russian aggression?
Yeah, because that is a problem, isn't it? And what was your take on what happened with Zelensky in the Oval Office?
Oh, yeah, that was a complete debacle. I think that played out. Look, Ukraine was not the aggressor. Donald Trump has treated Ukraine and President Zelensky as if somehow they were the aggressor. This was somehow their fault that they allowed Russia and Vladimir Putin to unilaterally attempt to invade a sovereign nation. And I think what we're seeing here is where the United States under a Donald Trump presidency is moving in a very vastly different direction than what many expected or understand it to be. And I think now what we're seeing here is the United States is making clear it will not come to the aid, it will not come to the rescue of its allies, or more importantly, democracy. Donald Trump believes that all relationships are transactional, and he believes that in order for the United States to engage or do anything, the United States needs to get something for that. The United States will no longer be the democratic police, nor will it uphold the banner of democracy, which is something very different. And I think it's now taking the rest of the world some getting used to.
Do you think? I think it looks more like the United States have put their foot down and said, we are very powerful, we will show you how much power we have and how much control we have, and we will change the world order in the way that we want it to be changed. And that looks like someone who's more powerful, and other nations are actually getting behind them because they're afraid of being left out, because they know they cannot succeed without America behind them. Do you not think it kind of makes America look even more powerful?
What you just described to me sounds more like autocracy than it does democracy. Sure, the United States has immense and enormous power, but it's how you use that power, and is that power being used for good? And I think what we're seeing, at least in the way that President Trump has attempted to force President Zelensky into an agreement that wholeheartedly benefits Russia and not Ukraine, nor democracy, nor the security of Europe, I think what we're seeing here is that power, even many within Donald Trump's own party do not see it that way, and I think are deeply troubled by what's playing out.
Well, you know, maybe I am describing autocracy, looking at the way President Trump and his government, they do seem very powerful and everyone's trying to bond with them. But I don't know. I think I saw something different in the Oval Office. I'm going to bring Jennifer Ewing in, Eric, just to get your take on that.
So two things. One, I think with regards to Eric's comment about democracy, I think this is not the Bush era anymore. The United States, and especially the voters of the United States, younger generations, no longer want America going around to random countries spreading democracy. You know, that has not served us well. Yeah. I don't think we have a lot of wins to show for the last wars that we've been involved with. So that's one thing. That is a fundamental change. People voted for that. As far as Ukraine specifically, I mean, Trump is a man who does not like war. As we know, there were no new wars started during his first presidency. And as much as people say, oh, he's in the tank for Putin, well, he's the only president of our last four that Putin did not invade another country under. You know, of course, he invaded Georgia under Bush, and he invaded Ukraine under both Obama and Biden. So Trump wants this war to stop. Nobody in the last 3 years has come up with a plan. First of all, what does winning look like for Ukraine? Nobody can answer that question. And nobody else has come up with a plan. So he's come up with a plan. He's gotten the two parties to sit down and discuss this. Like, why is peace such a bad thing? I don't know. It seems so strange to me. If this was any other president, they'd probably already have given him the Nobel Peace Prize. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but at least we are finally Ursula von der Leyen for the first time, I think a few days ago, when she realized the writing was on the wall, is discussing peace. Yeah. Anybody who discussed that over the last 3 years, you know, was a Putin sympathizer. So.
Well, I find it fascinating that some people start complaining that President Trump, they say, oh, he's trying to get a Nobel Peace Prize. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, well, not just what's wrong with that. I think it's quite laughable.
Oh, here we go. Oh, sorry, it's your show. Sorry about that.
Well, we've got the US Attorney General speaking right now. We won't go to her, I don't think, but we will go to them when Trump arrives.
I think it's laughable to accuse President Trump of being autocratic when, let's break this down. He promised something to the American people. He got elected on that promise and is delivering it in record time. That's the very definition of free democracy. If that isn't democracy, then what is?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? But it's funny that people who have this sort of deep hatred towards Donald Trump cannot accept that he's calling for peace and that is a good thing.
Yeah, they would rather have a forever war, which is unwinnable, which nobody else is willing to fund. And let's be honest, the Europeans have been supplying the Russian war machine with more euros than they've been giving to Ukraine. I mean, let's come back here for a second. The UK has banned Russian oil, but is the biggest importer of foreign refined petroleum made from, you guessed it, Russian crude. It doesn't make sense.
But it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what's that statistic? It's like the EU has spent over 22 billion euros on Russian oil and gas and given 18 billion in aid to Ukraine. So, I mean, is that funding both sides of the war? Or?
This all comes down to globalists versus nationalists. And you know what? For far too long, the word nationalist has been made into a dirty word.
Yep.
It really isn't. Are we fine again? No. And let's be honest, we've had enough of globalist failure for the last 20 years. What has it achieved? We are heading towards now a multilateral world. You have the Americans, well, you have a failing EU, we have a resurgent UK, we have Brexit Britain, that is finally free to make a trade deal with the Americans while the Europeans faff about with their 27 leaders trying to get agreement. And we have the fifth largest economy in the world, India, which is the world's largest democracy, and we have the Chinese. I don't see what's wrong with that multilateral order.
Well, let's come back to Eric Ham, because he's still there. Eric, so we were having a chat about the multilateral order. Did you hear what Aman said? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the United States has, for decades now, seen itself as part of a multilateral world. And of course, Europe and the UK in particular were always major players in all of that. In fact, we see today where the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is still in Canada, where he's meeting with other foreign ministers in the lead up to the G7. So I don't think this has never not been a multilateral world where the United States has not played a massive role in engaging. But I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing President Trump engage in a world, and he's trying to create a very different platform that some people, at least in the United States, are deeply uncomfortable with. Russia is, in fact, led by a thug, a strongman, and he invaded a sovereign nation. And typically what happens when we see that play out, the United States will take a side, and it's usually the side of right. And what we're seeing right now is Donald Trump is attempting to try to get peace, but we have to really question, what does peace look like? More importantly, what is peace going to look like for Ukraine? Ukraine didn't invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine did not actually take thousands of children from Russia. It was Russia that did that. It wasn't Ukraine that was bombing apartment buildings and people indiscriminately. That was Russia that was doing that. It was Russia that actually called for the aid of weaponry from Iran and soldiers from North Korea. It wasn't Ukraine that was doing that. Ukraine was getting aid from the European Union and from the United States. And so I think what we're seeing here is Donald Trump wants peace, but he wants peace at the expense of the Ukrainians and at the expense of Europe, not at the expense of those who actually led Ukraine into this war, which is Russia. In fact, Donald Trump, based on what we're seeing in terms of this agreement, it basically calls for Zelensky and the Ukrainians to give up everything while Putin gets to keep all of his ill-gotten gains, the land that he took, and then who is to rebuild, and the more than $200 billion that has now been withheld from Russia. Do they get that back? Is Donald Trump going to push that the Russians get that back, or does that go to actually the redevelopment of Ukraine? So right now, when we talk about peace, this looks more like capitulation.
Well, what would you do? You've got a dictator like Vladimir Putin. And
the United States.
Hang on, let me finish. You've got a dictator like Vladimir Putin, so you have to put your head into the mind of somebody like that who is prepared to do all the things that you've said, and then you have to then try and create a pathway to negotiate with him. So it's not going to look good if you suddenly befriend his enemy and become super chums and buddies. So you have to stay neutral whilst keeping the door open. Eric, how would you do it? Oh, Eric, you know what? I think we may have to stop it, leave it there, Eric Ham, because I think that Donald Trump is about to take the stage. Yes, Donald Trump is about to take the stage. We are live from the US. It is the Justice Department
thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Pam, very much. What a job you're doing. And it's a true honor to be with you today. This is a storied hall, if there ever was one. And based on the crowd, I think we broke the all-time record. But as we begin a proud new chapter in the chronicles of American justice, this really is something. We're turning the page on 4 long years of corruption, weaponization, and surrender to violent criminals, and we're restoring fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And you're the people that are doing it. Very, very proud of all of you. Under the Trump administration, the DOJ and the FBI will once again become the premier crime-fighting agencies on the face of the earth. People ask me, what am I going to do about law enforcement all the time? The fake news back there, they're asking me that all the time. What am I going to do? And when are you going to do it? And I answer them by saying I've already done most of it by appointing the people that I've appointed. They're sitting right here. They've done most of it. I don't do it, they do it. Right, Pam? I think, oh, you are so tough, they just don't know yet. Let me begin by congratulating the incredible people who will lead these historic reforms. And we start with somebody that you just saw, Pam Bondi. She's extraordinary, and I've known her very well for a long time. I watched her for a long time in Florida, for years in Florida, and highly experienced. She seems so young, but she's highly experienced, that I can tell you. She was a phenomenal attorney general in Florida, and she's going to do a really amazing job. Also, our new director of the FBI, Kash Patel. Kash, right. A man that I'm very proud of. I've known him and Emil for a long time under tremendous pressure. I saw these guys under some of the most corrupt judges it's not even imaginable how corrupt they were. And these guys never wilted. They were not shy. They fought. They weren't afraid, and they were brilliant. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and Principal Associate Deputy Attorney Emil Beauvais. And thank you both very much. Right. Great people. They're great people. The Chief of Staff, who's so highly respected, Chad Mizell. Thank you, Chad. Chad? Thank you, Chad. Our next administrator of the DEA, Terry Cole. Terry? Thank you, Terry. Good luck. Going to do great. Senior counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Boy, I've been watching him on television last couple of weeks. He is really a tough one, and he's a great one. Leo Terrell, you watch how good he's going to be. He's going to be so good. Thank you, Leo. Great guy. Assistant Attorney General of the Antitrust Division, who's got an incredible reputation. She'll do very, very well. Gail Slater. Thank you, Gail. Good luck. Great job. And we're joined by many, many great friends and terrific friends, and I won't be able to, too many to name, but some that I just see very quickly. General Flynn, thank you for being here. Here's a man who went through hell, by the way, and he shouldn't have. He's a patriot. He went through hell. We're also pleased to be joined by Senator Chuck Grassley and House Majority Whip. Where's Chuck? Hi, Chuck. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer. Tom, great job you're doing. Representative Guy Reschenthaler, one of the toughest names to say, but I got it perfectly, I think. And State Attorney General Ken Paxton, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Somebody who was with us early on, and she's really become a big star and very popular, Brenna Bird. Thank you, Brenna. Thank you very much. Steve Marshall, Alan Wilson, James Othermeyer, Chris Carr, Dave Sunday, Marty Jackley, as well as White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller. What a man Stephen is. Become a big star. Right, Emil? Steve Miller. Steve has been something very special. For generations, the Federal Department of Justice was one of America's most revered institutions. The men and women of the DOJ brought down the mafia, hunted down the killers, kingpins, and spies, tracked down terrorists and traitors, and tore down corrupt political machines all across America. This department commanded the respect and admiration of the entire world. And with Pam and Cash and all of the people I introduced and far more, big numbers, and all of you sitting back there, I recognize so many of you. But with you leading the way, it'll soon be the most admired and most respected of all. You're going to be more respected, and I really believe that there's also a lot of things to solve, a lot of problems to solve. But that's going to put you in the upper tier and maybe the top tier, and I believe that's going to happen. I'm so proud of the people in this room. But first, we must be honest about the lies and abuses that have occurred within these walls. Unfortunately, in recent years, a corrupt group of hacks and radicals within the ranks of the American government obliterated the trust and goodwill built up over generations. They weaponized the vast powers of our intelligence and law enforcement agencies to try and thwart the will of the American people. You remember the 51 intelligence agents that said, as an example, that Hunter Biden's laptop from hell came from Russia when they knew it came right from his bedroom. They knew that. It was a big lie, and they knew it so well. They spied on my campaign, launched one hoax and disinformation operation after another, broke the law on a colossal scale, persecuted my family, staff, and supporters, raided my home, Mar-a-Lago, and did everything within their power to prevent me from becoming the President of the United States. With the help of radicals like Mark Elias, Mark Pomerantz, and these are people that nobody's ever seen anything like it. So many others, but these are people that are bad people, really bad people. They tried to turn America into a corrupt, communist, and third world country. But in the end, the thugs failed and the truth won. Freedom won, justice won, democracy won, and above all, the American people won. There could be no more heinous betrayal of American values than to use the law to terrorize the innocent and reward the wicked. That's what they were doing at a level that's never been seen before. And it's exactly what you saw with Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and their cronies to do the building of the last 4 years. They ripped, what they've ripped down is incalculable. But what you're going to build up is likewise something that will be breaking all sorts of records. They set loose violent criminals while targeting patriotic parents at school board meetings. They dropped charges against Antifa and Hamas supporters while labeling traditional Catholics as domestic terrorists. The Catholics, we did very well with the Catholic vote, so I want to thank them for that. They imported, they really did, record numbers. I would say, what's with the Catholics? They're really after the Catholics, so I don't know. They were after a lot of people. Maybe they didn't even know why. They imported illegal alien murderers, drug dealers, and child predators from all over the world to come into our country while putting elderly Christians and pro-life activists on trial for singing hymns and for saying prayers. They went to jail for that. Our predecessors turned this Department of Justice into the Department of Injustice. But I stand before you today to declare that those days are over, and they are never going to come back. They're never coming back. So now, as the chief law enforcement officer in our country, I will insist upon and demand full and complete accountability for the wrongs and abuses that have occurred. The American people have given us a mandate like few people thought possible. We won every single swing state. We won the popular vote by millions and millions of people. We won districts 2,750. Think of that, 2,750 districts compared to 505. So we want it at levels that have, I don't believe, ever seen before. That's the one where you see the map of the United States and it's all red. Red for Republican, not for communist. Red for Republican. They would like it to turn red for communist, but it didn't work out that way. The American people have given us a mandate and really just a far-reaching investigation is what they are demanding into the corruption of our system. And that's exactly, I'm sure, what Pam and Cash and everyone else mentioned here and not mentioned is going to be doing. We will expel the rogue actors and corrupt forces from our government. We will expose and very much expose their egregious crimes and severe misconduct, of which was levels you've never seen anything like it. It's going to be legendary. It's going to also be legendary for the people that are able to seek it out and bring justice. We will restore the scales of justice in America, and we will ensure that such abuses never happen again in our country. And that's why on day one, I signed an executive order banning all government censorship and directing the removal of every bureaucrat who conspired to attack free speech and many other things and values in America. My administration stripped the security clearances of the disgraced intelligence agents who lied about Hunter Biden's laptop from hell. We revoked the clearances of deranged Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, and the crooked law firms that aided their partisan persecutions. And I went through it. These are state and city courts, and the corruption is unbelievable. We also terminated the clearances of the Biden crime family and Joe Biden himself. He didn't deserve it. In fact, he was essentially found guilty, but they said he was incompetent. And therefore, let's not find him guilty, I guess. Nobody knows what that ruling was, but I didn't want any part of it. I think I would have rather been found guilty than what they found with him. They said he didn't know what the hell he was doing, and therefore he's let him go. I said, you know, I'd rather be convicted, Pam, I think, than that. That was not good. I said, please convict me, don't say that. I pardoned hundreds of political prisoners who had been grossly mistreated. We removed the senior FBI officials who misdirected resources to send SWAT teams after grandmothers and J6 hostages. And it was a great honor for me to fire, I will tell you this, a great honor to fire James Comey. A great, great honor. That was nothing. There was no better day. A lot of people said, oh, that's too bad you did that. And they said that's going to be, and you know what? A year later, they said, that actually saved the administration, because the level of corrupt things that we learned after that turned out to be that they were doing, in fact, really bad things. He was a terrible person, did terrible things, and persecuted people, and all in the guise of being an angel, but he wasn't an angel. We created a brand new DOJ task force and anti-Christian bias, and under Director Patel, we're getting the FBI agents out of the headquarters in Washington, D.C., and back on the streets in pursuit of dangerous criminals where they belong and where they want to be. And, you know, you have that big FBI building, and it's a very big building, and they were going to build an FBI headquarters 3 hours away in Maryland, a liberal state, but that has no bearing on what I'm about to say, but we're going to stop it. Not going to let that happen. We're going to build another big FBI building right where it is, which would have been the right place, because the FBI and the DOJ have to be near each other. You can't that's one thing I did learn from this persecution. The FBI and the DOJ work together. Now, in my case, they work together for bad purposes, but they do. They were always together. So how can you have one that's 3 hours away? But one thing I said to Cash, well, we're going to get a great building built. It's going to be a magnificent building. He said, sir, we don't need that kind of room. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm just going to take a old Department of Commerce building that's about 25% the size, and that's what I need. We're going to have the best staff that you've ever seen, and that's what I need. It's in a nice location, but I don't need that big building. Why don't you just sell the site to somebody, and we're going to be very happy. And they want to have far fewer people, but we also want to have them in D.C., and if for no other reason, we like having law enforcement walking the streets of our capital, because when the bad guys are out there and they see there's an FBI agent, that's the ultimate in law enforcement, and they're not going to be acting so bad. We're cleaning up our city. We're cleaning up this great capital, and we're not going to have crime, and we're not going to stand for crime. And we're going to take the graffiti down, and we're already taking the tents down, and we're working with the administration. And if the administration can't do the job, we're going to have to take it back and run it through the federal government. But we hope the administration is going to be able. So far, they've been doing very well. The mayor's been doing a good job. We said there are tents galore right opposite the State Department. They have to come down, and they took them down right away. And so far, so good. But we want to have a capital that can be the talk of the world. When Prime Minister Modi of India, when the President of France, and all of these people, the head of Prime Minister of United Kingdom, they all came to see me over the last week and a half. And when they come in, I had the route run. I didn't want to have them see tents. I didn't want to have them see graffiti. I didn't want to have them see broken barriers and potholes in the roads, and we had it looking beautiful. And we're going to do that for the city, and we're going to have a crime-free capital. When people come here, they're not going to be mugged or shot or raped. They're going to have a crime-free capital again. It's going to be cleaner and better and safer than it ever was, and it's not going to take us too long. There's a new phenomena that is taking place with these violent, vicious lawyers that we have all over. They play the ref. You know what playing the ref is? Like the great Bobby Knight basketball coach. He'd scream and scream at the ref. He'd scream. I watched it. By the way, I love Bobby Knight because he endorsed me. And having Bobby Knight's endorsement in Indiana was an extremely good thing. A friend of mine said I was running in Indiana at the time. This was early on, 2016. And I was doing great, but friend came up and said, "You know Bobby Knight?" I said, "No, I don't, but I hear he was a tough cookie." He said, not only tough, he was beyond tough, but he's the most popular guy you can imagine. It turned out he wanted to endorse me. He called me about 2 years before. He said, "Sir, I'd like to endorse you." I said, "Is this really Bobby Knight?" He said, "It's me." I could tell it was Bobby Knight. He had been known for throwing the chair across the court and slapping a player. Can't do things like that, right? And the man that came in fired him. He was a new administrator for the college. That guy didn't last very long. They were like 14-0, and they fired Coach Knight. That was not good, but he had a little chip in his shoulder. But he loved Trump, and he came in, and he said, "I'd love to endorse you." He said, "If you ever run, please call me." So he said, "You know Bobby Knight?" I said, "Well, I don't know him, but he called me a couple of years ago." It was an amazing phenomenon. I took his number, and on each side of my desk in New York, I had stacks of paper, like nice and neat, but about 2 feet high each. And I said, I wrote his number down and I put it here 2 years ago. And I said, let me see if I can find it. It was almost like a miracle. I had other miracles that happened too. My ear is still throbbing. That was a miracle. That was a miracle also, wasn't it? That was a miracle also. Thank you. Thank you, Leo. Thank you. Thank you, my man. That was a miracle. Anyway, okay, that's very nice. Thank you. But so he said, Bobby Knight. So I said, I put his name down and I wrote it down. It's in one of these stacks. I lifted up. There would have to be 2,000 to 3,000 pages in each stack. I lifted it up, the first one, had no idea. And there was his name on a little card, Bobby Knight with his number. It was like incredible. I tell that story all the time. And I called him and dialed the number. He said, "I've been waiting for you to call." And he went out and he made a speech for me in a packed arena in Indiana, and it was over. It was over. He was a tough guy. He actually went a little far, if you remember. He made a great speech because he was actually a motivational type guy, to put it mildly. But he left the stage, and then I'm talking, and he walks back onto the stage. I said, uh-oh, this is trouble. Why is he coming back? He was a big guy, too. Why is he coming back? He said, "May I say a few more words?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead, Bobby, say a few more words." A little different. And he said, "And let me tell you something about this guy, Trump. This guy, if he has to, will use the nuclear weapons that we have. He will use he has no fear. He's going to use, and that's the kind of guy. And he walked off the stage. I said, I think I'm in big trouble, Pam. That was not good, but it worked out okay. In the meantime, we won the state in a landslide, and it was great, and it was just an amazing period of time. But this is the most amazing period of time. I think this is more amazing. What's taken place has been more amazing. I think it's more consequential, and if we do the job, one of the big media outlets said what we did was the most consequential election in the last 129 years. Well, if we do the job that we're all capable of doing, I think it's going to prove to be that and then some, and that's what we want to do. We have a real big shot at making this country so great, so great. What happened to our country was so sad. What they've done in 4 years to our country with the borders, with Afghanistan, the most embarrassing period of time, allowing the Russian situation, it was never going to happen with Ukraine. Allowing October 7th to happen would have never happened because under me, Iran was totally broke. They had no money. They weren't giving any money to Hamas or Hezbollah. It was totally broke. But allowing inflation, look at what inflation's done to people, been so devastating. And now you see that, by the way, price of eggs is down 35% in the last week and a half. We're doing a good job. Brooke is doing a good job. Brooke Rollins and everybody. And inflation's down, interest rates are down, gasoline has come down to a level that we haven't seen in a long time. All things that we wanted to do, because then everything else is going to be coming down. We want it to come down. We want bacon to come down, and groceries, a term I used to use. It's sort of an old-fashioned term, but I used to use it on the campaign trail. Those